Somewhere right now, a farmer in Nigeria is selling wheat. His buyer is in Indonesia. Neither of them is American. Neither of them wants American wheat. And yet, when the money moves between them, it moves in US dollars. Not naira, not rupiah, dollars. From a country that has nothing to do with this transaction. And the strange part is, nobody questions it. It just happens, like gravity, like it has always been this way and always will be. But it hasn't always been this way. Someone decided this. And the people who decided it knew exactly what they were doing. This is the story of the most powerful financial system ever constructed. A system so deeply embedded in the architecture of global trade that most people living inside it cannot see it. A system that makes the United States extraordinarily rich, gives it leverage over virtually every nation on earth, and costs the average American almost nothing to maintain. And a system that, right now, for the first time in decades, is showing real cracks. To understand why the world uses the dollar, you have to go back to the summer of 1944. World War II is not over yet. The Allied forces have just landed at Normandy. The outcome of the war is still technically uncertain, but a group of economists and finance ministers from 44 countries gather in a small resort town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. They are not there to talk about the war. They are there to design the world that comes after it, because they already know the Allies are going to win. And they understand that the post-war world will need a financial system, a common language for money. The problem they are trying to solve is not complicated to state, but it is deeply complicated to solve. Before the war, international trade was settled in gold. You sold me something, I gave you gold, or a currency directly backed by gold. The gold standard, stable, predictable, and brutally limiting. Because you can only trade as much as you have gold. And after a war that destroyed most of Europe's industrial capacity and drained most of Europe's gold reserves, the old system is simply not coming back. So John Maynard Keynes, the most famous economist alive, walks into Bretton Woods with a proposal: create a brand new international currency, something neutral, something nobody owns. He calls it the banker. It would be managed by a global institution. No country would have an unfair advantage. It sounds almost reasonable, but the United States delegation, led by a Treasury official named Harry Dexter White, has a different idea, a simpler idea, or at least an idea that sounds simpler: use the dollar. Here is the argument White makes. The United States at this moment holds approximately 70% of the world's monetary gold. American factories are intact. American cities were never bombed. America emerged from the war as the only major industrial economy that is not in ruins. So let the dollar be the anchor. Every other currency pegs its value to the dollar. The dollar pegs its value to gold at a fixed price, $35 per ounce. If you ever doubt the dollar, you can walk up to the US Treasury and trade your dollars for gold. The system is as good as gold, literally. The other countries, exhausted, broke, and desperate for American investment to rebuild, agree. Keynes' Bancor never happens. The dollar wins. And that decision, made in a mountain resort in New Hampshire in 1944, is still shaping your life today. For about 25 years, the Bretton Woods system works reasonably well. Global trade expands, economies recover. The dollar is trusted because the gold is real and the promise is kept. But then comes the 1960s. America starts spending money it does not have. The Vietnam War is enormously expensive. Lyndon Johnson's Great Society social programs are enormously expensive. And the US starts printing dollars faster than it is accumulating gold. Other countries, particularly France under Charles de Gaulle, start to notice. De Gaulle famously sends French warships to New York Harbor to collect French gold. He does not trust paper promises, and he is right not to. By 1971, the math no longer works. There are far more dollars circulating in the world than there is gold sitting in Fort Knox. If everyone tried to redeem their dollars for gold simultaneously, the US could not honor the commitment, and Richard Nixon knows it. So, on August 15th, 1971, in a Sunday evening television address that most Americans watched with complete bewilderment, Nixon announces that the United States is suspending the convertibility of the dollar to gold. Just like that. The gold window closes, the promise is broken, and every economist on earth holds their breath. Because according to the theory, this should be catastrophic. If the dollar is not backed by gold, it is backed by nothing. Why would anyone use it? And here is where the story gets genuinely fascinating. Because the dollar does not collapse, the world does not abandon it, trade does not stop, banks do not fail. Nothing dramatic happens immediately. And the reason nothing dramatic happens is because a quiet, almost invisible negotiation takes place in the early 1970s that nobody talks about and almost nobody knows happened. The United States goes to Saudi Arabia, which at this point is rapidly becoming the most important oil producer on the planet. And the deal that gets made, though it is never officially written down as a single treaty, is essentially this. Saudi Arabia will sell its oil exclusively in US dollars. In exchange, the United States will provide military protection and guaranteed security for the Saudi royal family. The other OPEC nations follow, and suddenly the dollar has a new foundation, not gold, oil. Think about what this means in practice. If you are Japan and you want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, you need dollars to do it. If you are Germany and you want to buy oil from Kuwait, you need dollars. If you are Brazil and you want to buy oil from Nigeria, you need dollars. Oil is not optional. It is the energy source that runs everything. Every factory, every ship, every airplane runs on energy. So now every country on earth must acquire dollars regularly, consistently, permanently, just to keep their economies functioning. They do not need gold anymore. They need dollars. The dollar has traded one foundation for something more powerful than gold. It has made itself the price of survival. This arrangement has a name. Economists call it the petrodollar system. But the deeper idea, the concept that explains why any currency becomes dominant, is something called reserve currency status. A reserve currency is the currency that central banks around the world hold in their vaults as savings, as insurance, as the universally accepted form of wealth. For most of the 19th and early 20th centuries, that was the British pound. Before that, it was the Dutch guilder. And now, overwhelmingly, it is the dollar. About 58 to 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars. The next closest competitor is the euro at roughly 20%. The dollar is not just dominant, it is in a completely different category. Now here is the uncomfortable math that most people never think about. When the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, something almost absurdist happens. The United States can run enormous budget deficits and enormous trade deficits, essentially spending more than it produces and borrowing more than it saves. And the world largely finances those deficits willingly. Because those countries holding dollars need somewhere safe to park them. And the safest place to park dollars is in US Treasury bonds. So they buy American government debt, which means the US gets to borrow money at very low interest rates from the rest of the world, essentially because the world has no alternative. An economist named Barry Eichengreen called this America's exorbitant privilege. It is a privilege so large, so structural, and so permanent that most Americans have no idea they are benefiting from it every single day. What does that benefit look like in concrete terms? It looks like lower mortgage rates than you would otherwise have. It looks like the US government being able to fund military operations, social programs, and infrastructure without immediately triggering a currency crisis. It looks like American companies being able to do business globally without the friction of currency exchange that every other country's companies must deal with. It looks like the US being able to impose economic sanctions on countries like Iran or Russia or Venezuela by cutting them off from the dollar system, which is essentially cutting them off from the global economy. The dollar is not just money, it is leverage, it is infrastructure, it is power, and it is not neutral. Every country that is forced to hold dollars is essentially providing a subsidy to the United States. They export real goods, cars, electronics, oil, food, and in return they receive dollars, which are ultimately just paper obligations from the US government. They then use those dollars to buy US Treasury bonds, which means they are lending money to America at interest rates America largely controls. The developing world, in particular, runs on a treadmill. They produce, they export, they accumulate dollars. They lend those dollars back to America. America spends. They produce more. The cycle continues. And the United States sits at the center of this cycle, collecting what is effectively a hidden tax on the entire global economy. Now, people have understood this for a long time. De Gaulle understood it in the 1960s. OPEC understood it in the 1970s. China has understood it for decades. And virtually every country that has ever been on the receiving end of American sanctions has understood it viscerally and personally. The frustration with the dollar system is not new. What is new is the capability to do something about it. China has been methodically building an alternative infrastructure for years. The yuan is now used in a growing number of bilateral trade agreements, particularly with Russia, Iran, and countries across Africa and Southeast Asia. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, along with newer members like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, have been explicitly discussing alternatives to dollar-denominated trade. Russia, after being cut off from the SWIFT international payment system following the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, accelerated its pivot to yuan-settled trade dramatically. Even Saudi Arabia has publicly discussed accepting non-dollar payment for oil, which, if you understand the petrodollar architecture, you understand is not a minor news item. That is a crack in the foundation, but here is where you have to be careful about the narrative. Because every few years, someone announces the death of the dollar. In the 1970s when Nixon broke the gold link, in the 1980s when Japan seemed to be taking over the world economy, in the early 2000s when the euro launched, in 2009 after the financial crisis, in 2022 after the Russia sanctions. And every time, the dollar emerges still dominant. Not because America is especially virtuous or especially wise, but because replacing a reserve currency is extraordinarily hard. It is not just a matter of deciding to use something else. The entire global financial plumbing, the contracts, the swap lines, the correspondent banking networks, the commodity markets, the bond markets, all of it is built around the dollar. Switching is not like downloading a new app. It is like trying to change the plumbing in a building while people are still living in it. And there is another problem for any would-be challenger. To be a reserve currency, you need to be willing to run deficits. You need to flood the world with your currency. You need deep, open, liquid financial markets that foreign governments can access freely. China runs a current account surplus and tightly controls its capital markets. The yuan is not freely convertible. You cannot just go to a market and freely buy and sell yuan the way you can dollars. China would have to fundamentally restructure its economy to make the yuan a true reserve currency. And doing so would cost China some of the advantages its current system provides. There is no free lunch here, even for the challengers. So where does this leave us? The dollar's dominance is eroding at the margins. That is real. The share of global reserves held in dollars has declined from about 73% in 2001 to around 58 to 60% today. That is a meaningful shift over 2 decades. But 58% is still a commanding lead in a field where the second-place currency is at 20%. The dollar is not dying. It is, perhaps, slowly and fitfully evolving from an uncontested monopoly to something more like a dominant currency in a gradually more multipolar world. Which sounds like a modest shift until you consider what it means for America's ability to borrow cheaply, to sanction adversaries, and to maintain the kind of global military and financial leverage it has enjoyed since 1944. The real risk is not a sudden replacement of the dollar. The real risk is gradual fragmentation. A world where some trade happens in yuan, some in euros, some in a BRICS currency that may or may not ever materialize. some in digital currencies that governments are quietly developing right now. A world where the dollar is still important, but no longer indispensable. In that world, America can still borrow, but perhaps not quite so cheaply. It can still sanction, but perhaps not quite so completely. It can still project power, but with a slightly smaller lever. For Americans, that might feel like a slow, almost imperceptible tightening, like a dial being turned down by degrees. Not a crisis, just a long, quiet diminishment. The farmer in Nigeria is still selling wheat to the buyer in Indonesia, and for now, the money still moves in dollars. But somewhere in a finance ministry in Beijing, and in a treasury office in Riyadh, and in a central bank in Moscow, people are working, carefully and methodically, on making sure that sentence is not true forever. They may fail, they have failed before, but they are further along than they have ever been. And the system that emerged from a New Hampshire resort hotel in the summer of 1944, a system built on the ruins of a world war and sustained by a secret deal about oil in the Arabian desert, a system that has enriched America and frustrated everyone else for 80 years, is, for the first time, being seriously questioned by people with the resources to do something about it. The dollar is not going anywhere tomorrow, but the world it was built for is already gone, and the world being built to replace it is under active construction. The question is not whether the dollar will remain the world's reserve currency forever. Nothing in the history of money suggests it will. The real question is what comes next, and more uncomfortably, whether the people in charge of the current system have any real plan for that transition, or whether they are simply hoping, as powerful institutions usually do, that the thing that has always worked will continue to work, right up until the moment it doesn't.